Okay, so now we're gonna go on. So you pretty much were able to again. So that was, you said that was five. So 10 years go by. Let's say you were productive. I knew when I first met you, again, with my journal. I had to go before this podcast. I went through my. I always kept the journal of things or my clients, and it was. Next time you come down to South Florida, I want to share it to you. I was looking at some notes of Big Brandon and and how proud I was of you doing some things. And I would also take emotional notes of things that triggered you on diets and stuff like that to get to hit our results. And but you were, I would say, an above par academic student in high school, correct?
Yes.
So like you didn't really have any learning challenges like myself, like reading, writing, or stuff. Was there any subjects that were bad, or if the teacher asked you to, like for me, which was a trigger, just due to my reading and writing skills, was if they asked me to read in front of the class, it would everybody would giggle and laugh that Paolo's stupid, or he was send him back to the zoo. He's a gorilla, and kids could be really cruel, where then I would just act. I would act out. So did that ever happen to you? So you were self conscious about the way you talk and your personality.
See, the interesting thing is that most of the time in the classroom, I really shined because of my intelligence, and I
Mm.
was able to read really well. And it was really when I started to think about it that it became a problem. Like whenever there was like a class presentation, I would like get really anxious about the presentation and like getting up there all the time beforehand, and when I was up there, holding on to all that anxiety of, oh, they're they're gonna think this, they're gonna think that, instead of being in the moment and simply presenting what I knew.
Like today, since like our campaign is working with apprentices and interns around the nations in different universities and the majors to give them real life experience. And I've been frustrated a little bit with the Education Institute, not only from the high school and public school areas, but you went to a very prestigious private school and a wealthy school. So they had probably extra resources that not a normal student in public schools would have. How when you did Would you recommend that they offer public speaking classes in school, like, because I don't know of any universities that make it mandatory. And I know over the past couple of years, I think it was after you're a junior that I said, because I know like how you are with me when you're so relaxed and you're really in the zone, and you're just a goofball like me, and we're smiling, we're having a good time, and we're cracking jokes, and you're so comfortable. But then if I take you in a situation and I say, hey, pitch this to this person, or sell this, or what are you going to do, you'll change. Your personality will actually change. So, and maybe it's because the way you're trying to get the words out or try to speak like me. And I tell you, you're not me. You got to be Brandon, and that's it. So, do you think public speaking classes would have helped at an early age?
Uh, that's what my school really tried to do with all the presentations, is make that be the public speaking. Though I definitely think it would be really helpful to have classes specifically on public speaking, how to prepare for it, and how to present and use your own words instead of like a lot of. I remember a lot of people would read off the slides. That's what they always would tell you: don't read off the slides, know your material, and then read it, well, sorry, recite it instead of reading it. And also at my university, for certain majors, they do make it mandatory to have public speaking classes.
But that's because you were gifted because you went to the type of school you went to, right? Or was this at university as well?
Uh, at my school, they had like they were a college preparatory school, so that is why they made it that way. I know a bunch of public schools do not have a bunch of those presentations because they don't prepare it the same way. but at the universities, they do make you do public speaking if you're in business majors or other sorts of related majors.
Okay, so I don't want to. I'm going to pivot on. So we crossed off the bridge, and hopefully we brought to the attention that people some of the verbal skills and motor skills that might happen and frustrate someone, hurt their insecurity, hurt their ego, maybe make them kick them into darkness. They can know perfectly. Looking at the screen right now, there's a young man that started this at 5 and now he's 25 and he's constantly still working on himself, but he pushed through and he's there. And again, they're not alone. This is one example of Brandon who's out there in Texas, that that you're not the only one that would be frustrated, and there's other people out there that could identify with your situation. So hopefully that will register with the community through our awareness campaign. Now I'm going to move on to college. So obviously this was a big thing for me when I was mentoring. We placed 550 kids, or about a little bit more than that. I forgot what the exact number was. And that was one of my proudest badges. And like when we were talking, when we were training, that wasn't, your goal to play baseball at like a D1 level. You had other character things about wanting what sports is truly meant for. Uh, and I applauded that. That's why you were so special to me and stood out, is that we after getting kids in college, they weren't getting the return on their investment through education. We found out the regular skills, uh, but I would try to also to mentor them, is that when you pick a school, make sure it fits your personality, because some kids would want to go to like what they see on TV. If I was like I grew up in New York, and the school I wanted to attend was, I got recruited by a bunch of schools, but the one school I wanted to go to was Arizona State. And I'm a free, I have no problem being on my own. But some kids that I trained and coached and got into them, they went to schools quite distance, and they would be homesick, fall into depression, and get into really dark places because they weren't have that connection with their family support system. And I know you're very tight with your family. You picked the university, which I think was only like 5 hours away from your family in Texas. Is about that. And also too, your brother was at your school, I believe, too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So, did you have, when you first went there? Yeah, I know you joined a fraternity, so I'm giving the audience a background. So you went in and you didn't have to worry about because you are kind of a quiet kid, even until you break the ice and you get to know them. Then you're super loyal. But is because if you think you went to a university that didn't have um, your brother there, who was either a junior or a senior because he was 2 years ahead of you, or a fraternity, or belonged to a social club, or a sports team. Do you think that it would have been hard meeting friends and getting in because of your communication skills?
I definitely think that it would have been more difficult if I didn't feel so comfortable being so close to home and having my brother there. I definitely would have had a little bit more trouble, even though I didn't necessarily have trouble meeting friends. And it's interesting that you asked this question, because I was talking to my dad about my college experiences in my freshman year. And I wondered why I had felt so good in the very beginning of my freshman year before I fell into my first really, really deep dark place in my junior year. And I realized it was because in my freshman year, and even before I went in there, is that I said to myself, I'm going to break out of my shell. I'm going to be a brand new person. And I was very friendly and very open and very engaging with everyone. And because I was trying to be that person, I didn't revert back to my old ways, and I was able to communicate with everyone. It was a very different experience.
Well, you were like, even though you and your brother are a lot alike, you're also very different too. It's really weird. It's a weird situation. You both are great kids, and I could tell like from the way your family is and how much respect I have for your family. Is they're very generous people, and they're just good. You had a good family structure. It just shows that mental health does not discriminate. It could be in any situation, but so what you were saying is like, your first year was great and blessed, but you're trying to find your own identity because your whole life you were almost following, uh, you know, um, Michael's shoes, in school, your brother. So when you were following his shoes, were you ever compared to him? Because, he was like, quarterback of the high school football team. You didn't play football, you played baseball. You didn't have clicks, but, I did worry about you from afar, just me being protective of everybody I work with and saying, hey, if I ever found out anybody was bullying Brandon, I'd probably be up there before the father, and say, hey, stop picking on Brandon, so, was that like part of the year, your first year, was that you were looking for your own identity, or it was that thing of freedom? I don't have my mother get me out of bed. I have no real responsibility. If I want to go to class, I go to class. If I want to, do the things that kids do, experiment. You have that. You have no police officer and warden behind you keeping you in check to do your homework. Is that why you think you liked your first year so much?
Yeah, it actually it was definitely the freedom, and uh, talking to him actually put it into a chronological aspect of what changed from me being really, really happy to actually I had a period of depression my freshman halfway through my freshman fall. I like went really high up my freshman summer, and then I was doing well into fall, and then I lost like one of my best friends at the school, and without him, we used to do everything together. So I started to go really far down because I sort of felt like I lost a part of my identity of who I was at school because he and I were sort of like a duo, and without him, uh, I felt kind of lost. Even though I had all these friends around me, I felt like I lost a part of myself, and I think that's what I always was struggling to find an identity.
So, like, what I want to do is, again, we're trying to bring so the viewer can identify to your story in a different way. So, don't give me a long synopsis, but try to give me the shortened thing. So, you had like a best friend, and what made that best friend relationship break up, if it's not too personal or if it's something you feel comfortable sharing, and then how did it go? And then what did you actually feel that it's like, breaking up with a girl or something? It's now I'm alone, and all of a sudden that was your first experience with depression. So, or what you felt is, and I also think, again, and this is just including myself, my interpretation is there's a difference between depression and sadness, as we'll get into it. When you're really depressed, me and you have shared similar stories of what depression and darkness is, opposed to like if you go to mourn or grieve somebody, it is depression and crying, but it's a different level. So, what made that go? So that triggered, that was your first battle with triggering, and that had nothing to do with your cognitive skills or motor skills.
So it was really feeling like alone in my pledging process at my fraternity. What happened was he had a personal issue with his family. He didn't really have a lot of money in the first place, and then something happened with his family where they had to pay legal fees, and he could no longer be a part of the pledge program. And I was so close to him that like we had to spend the entire summer together, and he and I worked really well together because he would go up to girls where I wasn't as confident doing so. So I always went with the flow, and I felt like we always had a great time. I didn't even really have to think about it. And all of a sudden I was alone again, and I like started to think instead of just doing things. And no one around me really knew him like I did, so I didn't feel like I could talk about it, which was definitely a problem. Uh, like
Did he
whenever
ever leave school?
he eventually did have to leave school, he
Oh,
started
okay.
to have his own issues as well. Uh, though whenever I started to talk about it, it sort of goes back to when I got really frustrated when I was trying to explain something to someone. I always felt like people didn't understand when I was like, "Oh, he had to leave." Like, "Oh, that sort of sucks," and I'm just like, "You don't understand how much it sucks for me."
Yeah, but you know what? That's another character I would say that again, that would not be too preachy, but that just shows how sensitive you are and what a good friend and a good person that pure heart you have, you know. So anybody that's watching, I guess you can't say, wow, you know, don't be upset. You know, this is a great quality you have, but you still got to get through that. And how long did it take you to get through that? You know, of missing your wingman, you know, pretty much.
What I ended up doing was because I felt so alone, I got back together with a girl who I had sort of written off because she she said that she wanted to start dating and be exclusive, and at the time I was an 18-year-old in college. I really wanted to experiment and have fun and
Right.
be free, but at this point I felt so lonely. I reached back out to her, and I've always been sort of a lone wolf. So without having people to share with, she was like someone I could once again connect with and share with someone who I felt knew me.
Was that when I was always calling you at school and I was saying, hey, big dog, remember, no glove, no love?
That probably was.
Okay. All right, good. So you transitioned. So that's actually another thing that I would like to ask Dr. Bourne and Dr. Everson is, you know, is that a healthy coping skill? Is if we feel a void in our life and we lose somebody, that our wingman, our partner, our soulmate, a girl, a boyfriend, is to immediately try to self-medicate ourselves by finding a replacement for that person? Or is that a healthy thing? Or could that be a dangerous situation? So I don't have that question, the answer to that, but that's something that I think people should ask somebody if they're in therapy. Do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Okay. And then, all right, so let's move in. So you finished up. So you had that little bit of you had a great start to your freshman year. You were in a pledge. You had a good support system, friends, brother. You were playing all the sports in the fraternity team. You were dating. How was your academics? Were you
My
able to were you able to do the you know, since you didn't have mom and dad, making sure you did your homework, turning your papers on, showing up at class, and doing that? Were you able to stay responsible?
See, that's the thing. I was really struggling in a lot of different areas. Academically was one of them, and I wasn't really able to balance everything. And that had always been a problem for me. Is I always was definitely a procrastinator. I did not like school. My mom, for most of my life, always would push me to do my work, and I would definitely be one of those people that would wait till the last minute. And with my intelligence, I was able to pull that off for most of the time. But when I was at college and I had no balance and no one to tell me what to do, uh, I was having a real problem balancing everything, knowing when to do my pledging activities, when to do my schoolwork, when to go to the gym. I definitely have what I would call a one track mind where I like to focus on one thing at a time and then finish it. And when multiple things come at me, uh, I get very overwhelmed very easily. And instead of dealing with it as they come, I got overwhelmed and I didn't deal with it.
Now, I almost guarantee this is not an isolated incident. I bet you a lot of our viewers and kids that are in, especially in college, because that's when you're away from home and you don't have anybody riding you to complete assignments, even though as we mature, we shouldn't have to have people tell us what to do. It's like as we become graduate school, we don't want to go to work on a, after on Monday after we had a really great weekend, but we have to do it to put a roof over our head, food on our plate. So we have to do some things to be productive, even though we don't necessarily want to. But when you're in college, you don't have anybody policing you, and your grades aren't coming out for 6 months. So you could always push it off and procrastinate and put it off at a later time. Is there any tools out there now looking back that, like, I don't know, again, every university has a different I believe support system. Is there anybody, because athletes like as myself in my role, I had my schedules planned out for me. So pretty much my advisors said, my advisors, my trainers, my coaches, my work employee, because I worked during school, is that everything was scripted. So my day was fully packed. I had no time to really think. I was like 9 to 10 here, 10 to 11 there. I didn't have time to procrastinate because I always had to be at the next thing. If I had too much time on my hands, I probably would have fell into the same trap as you. Is there anything now looking back that you could have used as a support system, or that would have maybe helped you, make that, do the things not necessarily your mother like told you to do, because you got to become a young man and you have to be uh, responsible for your own actions, but that could help you with that structure system. Because I'm sure a lot of students have a problem once they're independent, finding that structure and being disciplined to complete assignments. Did they have anything like that?
They always have academic um, tutors, and they had other sorts of academic resources that you could go to. But my issue was that I never wanted to reach out for help. I always thought I could handle it by myself.
Right. Now you know that. So now looking back in hindsight, it's always looking back in hindsight and say this: is there anything, if you had to mentor a kid, how do you push through that? Because we also say that, somebody could be in the worst pain and want, definitely you want to help them, but if they don't want to help themselves, they're not, you can't help them, So is there anything that maybe that I could learn from you, is when you're at that place and you think you can do it, but you're not doing it, and it's just becoming a downward spiral. That is because intervention, sometimes people can overact and get too deep into it. Not to say it's not a good tool, but is there anything? I'm just searching for a question for somebody that might be looking out there saying, okay, identify what Brandon's talking about, and I'm the same way. I could fix it, but really you couldn't. It was out of your control. Where it would have been a lot easier if you just surrendered to those emotions.
I think the best advice I can give is you're not weak for asking for help. If you recognize that something isn't right and that you're struggling, the first step is asking for help. Whether or not the first thing really helps you, like going to a psychologist, going to a tutor, maybe that doesn't work for you. But the most important thing is that you took that first step. They always say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And you find, okay, I did that. Maybe it didn't work, but now I can go try and find something else that may work. And all of a sudden, you start to get that positive momentum, and everything starts to become a lot easier. And that's what always has worked for me, is that my mind might be telling me, no, it's too hard. But then as soon as I take that next step, I'm like, oh wow, that was actually nowhere near as hard as I had imagined it up to be, and I feel a lot better.
Wow, that's great advice. And then what about like if you needed something to coach, like when when I was coaching you, I gave you a homework and we put a training program together that you had to follow. If you went to a tutor, like one time and then journaled all the things, the good and bad? Do you think that would be another great tool?
Yeah, I think that's a great tool. I journal all the time, and that's probably been the one of the best behavior patterns that I've instilled in my own life that's kept me honest. And you have to
Yeah.
be honest. That's the most important thing. You have to be honest with yourself because you're always with yourself, so you know what's really going on. And that was an issue I had with journaling for a while. I think I told you one or two times is that I used to write things down in my journal, and I wouldn't like how it sounded, or I would think about it, and I would say, "Man, that sucks. That this is my life," and I just would rip it out, crumple it up, and throw it out.
Which is defeats the whole tool of
Exactly.
journaling.
It was
So it's
self-defeating.
self-destructive pattern.
Exactly. It was self-defeating patterns coming back together. Just like
Wow, that's great because I like to share. Like I told you, I said that you're going to learn from maybe the mistakes that we could always learn from our mistakes as well as our success stories. So that's a great example to share with the community. So hopefully that people take that note is uh, uh, that they don't rip it up because that's just between you. You know, no one's going to be that. That's a safe place, and you could share it with whoever you really trust. And I believe um, the safer, smarter thing to do is to share it with a professional because um, I have trust issues. So it's like if I had to share it with a friend of mine or just a friendly person back in high school, you don't know how secretive they might say. "Oh, Paolo, did you hear what Paolo shared with me?" And that would it would turn into gossip, and then that would crush me because once you put your trust in somebody and someone breaks that trust, that could be devastating. You know, and gossipy. So that could be very hurtful if you trust somebody and they betray your trust. So that's great advice, I think, to help them go through. So journal, be honest is the key word is being honest and leave the ego at the door. And what I try to do is actually, I'm really hard. And it's like, even during this podcast, I'm focusing on your face and I'm not even looking down. And that's me being honest with 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 how I feel about my body image, with all the medications and poor eating habits, not be able to exercise. Like you know how I used to look, and then now this is something I got to go over for, and I have the control of this issue. So that's something I write every day. Is tomorrow you got to at least walk 10 yards. 15 yards. And if I didn't do that, I give myself a grade, a lower grade, and I bring it into my doctor and then they find out why I didn't do it on certain days, and then I can answer those things. So, okay, so that's great. So then we'll keep moving forward so this doesn't come too redundant. But it's you do have an interesting story, and I think there's so many common things that they kids can relate to, especially the college kids. So you got to your first year, you passed all your classes, and then you didn't pass all your classes.
no, I did not.
Oh, okay.
Well, I
Because I
passed. I passed, but not with satisfactory grades for all of them. Like for to be on the tracking to graduate in your major, you have to get a certain grade in all your classes, and I did not get that grade.
Now, was do you think a lot of it was depression because also too, or like losing your wingman, it would brought you down a little bit? Or another thing, being honest, is when you're independent and you don't have the responsibility, it might not be a mental health issue. It might be just abusing that freedom. And I'm partying too much, I'm dating too much, I'm going out and socializing. And if I'm out at 2 in the morning and I don't want to get up for my morning class. So is we want to make sure we're clear in separating what is play and what is actually mental health and from hurting you, you know. So because there's no excuse for really, and that's not our campaign is to give somebody an excuse for failing a class because they were having a good time, you know, where I could be a little bit more sympathetic if somebody is having something and you lost a loved one, or you're going through a mourning process, or you're like something with your friend was going through personal issues. I have a little bit more. I'm a little bit more sympathetic to those issues. So go ahead.
I think sometimes I, without realizing it, was sort of drinking my feelings away. And especially when I was procrastinating and I didn't feel like I was doing well in my classes, I think it's sort of interwoven where I was having those feelings, and it created sort of a mental health issue where I wasn't aware of it, but and with alcohol being a depressant, it just made me really feel worse, and it just made the cycle continue.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that because in high school you were never a drinker, right? You were,
Yeah,
you were
I really did. I really did not drink. I would describe myself as pretty straight edge until I was
healthy.
probably.
You're a good eater. You were, I mean, you were pretty straight edge. And that, but that also too, and again, not to excuse that, because you know my history and my story, which I shared with you and through the campaign about some of my self-medicating for different reasons. But that one sounds like it's part of the culture, like even though I was never in a fraternity, but like the fraternities that we see on TV, Animal House, that's what's projected to be a cool guy. We got to go to the cake party, right? We got to do the funnels and stuff like that. So if you want to fit in, you could get caught up in that world, right? And so you weren't drinking to drink your feelings away. You were drinking to be one of the guys and have a good time. And like when you drink, you any of the fears, or is the right word, inhibitions, is
Yeah,
that I'm looking for,
the right word.
is like, so that might give me like, I never understood it. My friends that used to come down to the bars that I was working at and security would say, hey, come with me. And they'd be really shy, and they said, I got to get my beer muscles, so they would go drink. And then the next thing they would do is the quietest guy would be rapping on the prettiest girl where they couldn't do it sober, and I didn't understand that, because I never drank at that point. So was what you got caught up in, that culture?
Uh, I don't think I. I mean, it might be unconsciously so, but I never really felt like I needed to fit in with the guys or like I needed to prove anything. I've always, like I said, been sort of a lone wolf, and what I thought about myself mattered the most. I would think about what other people thought, but it was sort of how it reflected on me, if that makes sense.
Yep, it does. And then the other ones is, again, I'm trying to tie in questions that I think that other kids would want to know, or situations that if they're going into school that they got to be careful of. Because if you remember when I was coaching you, and because I said the same thing to almost every kid, I try not to be a parent and say, listen, you go to a cake party tonight, and where we were training her in the summertime, and you drink, what am I going to do? I'm not there. I said, yeah, it's not good for you, but you put in all this work during the training. So when you drink, you're going to feel like garbage the next day, and you're going to pull a hamstring, which means that you're not going to be able to play in the game on Saturday. Do you remember us having that conversation?
Yes,
So
I
I
do.
tried to come at that way without being too preachy. So, is that, but you have to, I also believe, especially when it was, we become more independent and we leave the nest, you have to learn your own lessons, unfortunately. And that's why I believe in, and it comes through, I guess, like AA, but it's more in some other programs, is people, places, and things. And that's why I encourage like everybody to try to find out, is I never, I mean, I think you were the same way, is the, we weren't clicky guys like me. I hung out with jocks. I hung out with the honor students, the chess team. I hung out with everybody. I wanted to absorb. Actually, I was more like mentally attracted to the people that did things and excelled at things that, like academics, that I wasn't good at. Where you would just be you were like a bouquet, right? Like you would be friends with anybody that was cool and nice and considerate, right?
Exactly.
Now, did you did then did the did it come into the point where, see, like if I never judged, and most of basically where I got introduced to like drinking, even though drinking was very big and it was social. I mean, it was weird because I went to school in London, and it was blew me away when I went into like we had a school pub, and the drinking age is younger. My professor asked to buy me a pint of beer, and I was I was like shocked, I was like, no, I don't drink. And they're like, really? And they laugh. They're like, I'm like, yeah, you yank, and they made a fun of it because it's part of their culture. Where in the United States, you would never have that. Your professor come in and do that. So, but I never judge people. Like I've been around Hollywood and I've been around every situation that I could think of. So I've been around drugs. I've been around everything. I just never participated because that wasn't my thing. Was since you had a wide variety of friends, was did they try to get you to experiment and come and say, "Hey, Alex, do this with me. Let's go. Let's have a blast and do that." Because I'm trying to put things that maybe might have triggered some depression moods or episodes or go through some stuff that maybe kids. Obviously, we know that anything that's not prescribed is really not good for us. We know that, but college is the time when people experiment. So that's it. So did you have that happen to you?
I I didn't feel even if people were sort of having things like, let's say, cocaine, uh, people were never really that pushy. That I really noticed. If you said no, they didn't really care. They understood that everyone to each their own. But what was definitely an interesting experience was with Xanax. A bunch of my friends and a bunch of the kids that I know got really into that pill because it really relaxes you, and it actually gave me a moment of clarity one morning uh, during my sophomore year when I took it, and then I woke up the next day and I didn't feel so down, and I said to myself, I was like, why do I feel so good? And I'm like, it's the Xanax, but why do I not always feel this way? Because that used to be my normal of feeling pretty good, where my baseline had gotten really, really low. And it was sort of a moment of clarity through the darkness, which was sort of interesting.
Yeah, and thank God that you were able to catch it when you did. Where opposed to my story, and we don't have to rehash it. Those anybody who wants to go back to it to look at when I was 30 was that's exactly how it works. Those things catch you off guard, and where certain people like I can't like I tell people like I'm allergic to alcohol. Some people are great social drinkers. If I drink, I get a really bad migraine even before my disease. I throw up, I feel terrible. So why would I want to do that where other people just could go out on a boat and have a great time and feel great the next day, where that just wasn't my thing. So is was that usually, and since you're not too far removed, I mean you're only 25, it's been like 2 years since you've been out of college, right? Yeah, so like does basically what were the big social drugs was like the stuff that I because now I'm feeling old is that is like ecstasy. Like I couldn't imagine coke because that is like so expensive and stuff like that, but I guess you do have rich kids and different stuff like that. So I'm only thinking college is about beer and drinking, but is the drug scene is very big in college.
Yeah, it's pretty big. I would say more people are into to marijuana, but the what I would call the party crowd, the people that like to binge drink, have 5, 6 plus drinks, like they're bragging about how many drinks they have. They have 8 what plus whatever. Those are the guys that are and girls that are doing the cocaine to keep the party going. Uh,
Wow.
but ecstasy, I didn't experience as much. Uh, there were some people that did it and some people that did mushrooms. Uh, and I mean, there are drugs all over the place, but what I saw most commonly was drinking, cocaine, and marijuana.
How about Adderall? Now that like I had one of my family members that was prescribed that, that said he says it's doing wonders with his study habits. It's really helping him. But the friends are reaching out that know these on it, and they said, "Hey, can I buy it?" And I didn't know it. It was it's I guess the way you explained to me, you said it's like cocaine, right?
Uh, I wouldn't. I mean, it is a stimulant like cocaine, but I feel like cocaine is more like amps you up and makes you want to party. You can't really focus. You're just sort of like hyped up on energy, while Adderall is more of a focus uh, type of, as people would call it, a high, a focus high, the effects at least. And like you said, it's very prevalent on college campuses. Adderall and a similar drug called Vyvanse, and people are buying it to be able to focus and study and pull all nighters. And it also is used as a party drug as well to keep the party going, to keep them awake if they either sprinkle it in their drink or snort it.
Oh, okay. All right.